right? So if you just use a little bit of creativity and take some pride in what you do, you can always you can sound good no matter what you're playing on, right? So point being, for me, I'm used to a certain set of instruments that I play on at home or that I play on at work. Most of this stuff are things that I'm not used to playing on, so I got here really early. Believe me, I'm not a morning person, but I got here really early and made sure I got my setup, and so I didn't have to do a lot of maneuvering once I started. Everything was already in position to go. Okay? So as you guys know, the majority of the work, for the majority of my job, honestly, is setting things up. If there's time for warm-up and time to practice, that's usually icing on the cake, and it almost never happens, right? Because we spend a lot of time just moving stuff around, okay? But if you do all that stuff in advance and think before you play, then the playing can actually be a lot of fun because you can just focus on how you sound, okay? All right, let's do a couple more. These are a couple of excerpts from Scheherazade by Rimsky-Korsakov. More Russian music. The Russians wrote a lot of really great stuff for our instrument, so we tend to play a lot of them in orchestra. This is the third and fourth movement from Scheherazade, and in this case I'm going to be, over there I was doing the parts of 3 people as one. This one I'm going to be doing the parts of 2 as one, but it's a double that rarely happens. The reason this comes from a very unique story. I never would have thought of doing this. In fact, most of these things kind of happen by necessity. What do they say? Necessity is the mother of innovation. I think I'm messing that up, but it's something like that. So a lot of my creativity and innovation has come out of pressure situations where, oh my God, we're missing a player. Here's the concert. What are we supposed to do? Very first time I ever performed this piece, it was with a regional orchestra in the DC area. And traffic in DC, I mean, I know it's terrible around here. DC is another level entirely. I mean, it really is. Like outside of LA, it's about the worst you can get in this entire country. So this regional orchestra was in Northern Virginia, and the people, we had 2 percussionists that were coming from Southern Maryland. They had to get all the way around the Beltway in DC. Traffic hit, there was an accident. It was like a 4-hour commute. They wound up showing up after the concert was over. It was one of those situations. So we were down 2 percussionists, and we're about to play Scheherazade, which is a huge percussion piece. So we're scrambling, oh my God, okay, the audience has paid full ticket price. It's not like they paid less because there's less percussionists on stage. So we're like, let's give them as much of what they're expecting to hear as possible. So this was a byproduct of that, and it's where I'm going to cover a lot of the triangle and tambourine at the same time. This is all about having things organized. I'd say, let me go ahead and play the next excerpt because I'm going to change tambourines. And then, yes, Park, what can I do?
You changed the triangle beater?
I did.
Yeah, so I didn't get the reason for it.
The reason is at the very beginning I'm playing triple piano, and so I'm using a very small, very light triangle beater. Later on I have to play those rolls that get up to fortissimo, and so I'm using a slightly heavier beater. So that's why. It's mostly about dynamics and about control. Again, if I were playing just the triangle part, I could probably use one beater for all of it. But again, having to play triangle and also handle the tambourine, which in and of itself is a challenging part by itself. But having to do it where I'm not be able to hold it up and do it the way I normally would. I have to make a few adjustments. So that's a good observation if I didn't notice that. I will do that again here in a moment. So let me go to the next movement. This is some really fast cooking stuff. That was kind of the ballad. One caveat about this, there are some things in other parts of this movement that truly I cannot cover both triangle and tambourine at once. I'm just going to play a few excerpts where I can. We do the best we can when these circumstances come up, but we can't always cover everything. We just kind of prioritize and go, what's most important? What are the soloistic parts? Let me make sure those are there and everything else is great. Understand? Okay, good. Not easy to do that. The biggest thing that makes that possible, honestly, is this cool little rig that I have, and I will show you actually how this comes apart. So again, I don't like playing tambourine on anything other than my body. I don't ever like to use sticks. I don't ever like to do anything that makes it sound less like a tambourine. Okay, so a lot of my tambourine playing comes from figuring out ways to not have to use sticks, right? Which means a lot of times playing upside down, using my knee and my fist to play. I will tell you that part's kind of very famous, and most people, if it's just one person playing on tambourine, will use their knee and their fist and go, right? See how loud? That's got a really nice crispy sound. Well, all of a sudden I'm covering triangle and tambourine at the same time. I do not have that luxury anymore to do that. So we've got a cool little contraption that Grover makes that, you see this little metal attachment up there? It's basically just a clamp, a glorified clamp, that this part holds the rim of the tambourine. And honestly, we used to, for the longest time, the little hole there that most tambourines have is intended to be mounted on a cymbal stand. Like you would kind of do it like that and then tighten the bolt at the top. The problem is that almost never stays in place when you play it. If you try to hit it with sticks or with hands or anything, it wobbles and falls over, and you hit it 3 times and all of a sudden it's upside down. All right? So this is a really nice innovation that allows me to grip by the handle, which is what I would normally do anyway. Like I would grab it by that area. It's not quite as good. You may have noticed it kind of wobbled and bounced a little bit. Could you kind of hear that? Mm-hmm. So it's not ideal. It's not the best thing in the world, but it's a good solution in a situation like this. And I didn't have anything quite this fancy when I was stuck in that situation I was telling you about, so I kind of had it on the stand and I used a cymbal stand, and it honestly wasn't brilliant. So this is a nice compromise for me. So Another thing about that, again, kind of playing triangle and tambourine at the same time, I don't want all of the elements to go away just because I'm covering two parts at once. So one thing important in playing the triangle towards the end there especially is you have these quick little eighth notes, okay? Well, I'm playing eighth notes that I have to muffle in between each one. So if I'm just playing normally, right, that's a piece of cake. Anybody can do that. Now all of a sudden I got to play tambourine at forte and triangle at forte and muffle in between. So I don't know if you noticed, I was striking the triangle and the tambourine at the same time, then using my left hand to muffle. So it was like that. And it took me a while to figure out where do I need to have this triangle so that works with as little motion as possible, right? So a lot of times the multitasking is also about efficiency, right? Making sure that, again, things are in the right position, but also that you can do them. Otherwise, things start falling down. We've all been there. You guys, I know, I remember my high school band too. Like, anytime we had to multitask, there was one thing here, the other thing was way over there, someone's running back and forth, the music goes flying. You know, those accordion parts that you grab one page and you go, and then you look back and you're trailing music behind you. That was a famous one, used to happen a lot. So a lot of these things you're seeing are about trying to avoid those little quirks and things that can happen that can make us seem like less professional than we are. All right? Group that was a very reputable group, and we had traffic problems and we had problems of someone being sick, and then we wound up literally with 2 percussionists to play what normally requires 5 people. Okay? So the one guy and myself that were left, this one guy was quite a bit older. He was in his early 70s, and he kind of had a bass drum only policy. That was his policy as well as the conductor's policy. Like, that just, he was kind of had become bass drum guy. And even when all hell broke loose and we didn't have all the players, he was like, I'm just playing bass drum. They want to hire someone else, they can. So I wound up looking at this part going, I got to cover everything except for bass drum. How in the world am I going to do this? And honestly, in that situation, because there wasn't really any pressure, because I know I can handle the part I normally play, which in this case was xylophone. But we needed bells, snare drum, crash cymbal, suspended cymbal, tenor drum, woodblock, all these things. What I'm going to do for you now was not quite as refined when I figured it out on the fly, but this is a little more advanced version. And I have not played it this way since, but it's kind of a fun little showcase. So this is me acting like 4 people at once. And the music is from Aaron Copland's 3rd Symphony. That I'm using. I think these are probably a little hard for xylophone. These are a little soft for bells, for me, in terms of what I would play in a large ensemble normally. But you'll see I have to do, I'm kind of going back and forth and playing xylophone and bells at the same time. So one mallet's doing that, one mallet's doing that. And then later on I have to switch to a xylophone roll. So I needed to make sure that the 2 mallets match. Right? So that's a case of using really hard xylophone mallets that kind of work on both instruments at the same time. And then I've got this guy out here to play the tenor drum part. This time, most of the time, very few people can really tell what we're doing back there. But I like to take a lot of pride in it, and you know, it is what I do for a living. But even if you don't, I will tell you this: some of the most successful professionals that I know that used to play in band and used to play percussion, maybe even studied it in college, became very successful business people and very successful doctors, because this creativity and this sort of outside-the-box thinking will always help you in any number of fields that you may choose to go in. So maybe none of you are thinking about doing music for a career, That doesn't mean that you can't go and study music beyond high school and learn some of these skills, because believe me, they do apply across a lot of areas. It's just general creativity and taking pride in what you do always matters, okay? All right. And you guys, what I'm doing over here with the sticks and mallets is like, again, everything kind of has to be in the right place, or when my switches, if I reach and something's not where I expect, I get thrown for a loop and I may not be in the right position to play. So it's always about, before I play, getting stuff exactly where I need it. So, another thing about playing snare drum, like, this looks all well and good, but I would not normally have it up at an angle like this, okay? This is purely in a position to allow me to do all that stuff I have to do coming up, and normally I wouldn't reach over and play snare drum like this, okay? But again, it's not in an ideal position, but is surrounding this sort of multiple setup, so I have to kind of angle things in and have things in the right position. My cymbals, you kind of notice, are far apart. That's not really on purpose. Well, it is on purpose, but it's literally so that when I'm doing all these other things with sticks flying around, that I'm not hitting something I don't want to hit, right? See what I mean? So that's why they're separated like that. The wood block, I don't know if you could tell in that first excerpt, I was holding, again, a different mallet out here to play the wood block with. So that's kind of a fun little thing when you find yourself feeling like, man, I'm really having trouble playing xylophone. Playing xylophone and wood block at the same time. So I actually, at one point, I'm playing the wood block and the xylophone note simultaneously. So I started this out and I had the wood block up here on a stand like you might normally hold it for a normal person. I realized I can't actually reach that. So I've got it positioned just so and kind of angled in. So if you'll notice, I'm playing those two notes at the same time. I'm using this configuration, which I used on the Tchaikovsky earlier, where I'm using this outer stick as a cymbal note. So the first time I play cymbal, it actually is supposed to be suspended cymbal. The big notes later on, towards the end, are actually crash cymbals. And I will tell you that the way I achieve that, again, it's not quite the same as playing crash cymbal, but I just don't have the ability to do crash cymbal there and then pick up snare drum sticks. So I'm just having two different size cymbals. And if you guys ever really study playing crash cymbals, you may notice like a really good legato crash sometimes kind of has a flam-like effect to it. You can almost hear a ba-ching sound. So for that reason, pay attention this time when I play the crashes. You'll notice I don't play them at exactly the same time. There's a little bit of a delay between this and this, which kind of creates that flam effect. So again, I'm not playing crash cymbals, but I'm trying to sound as much like I am as possible. Understand? Okay, good. And then really the fun part, honestly, is just when I'm doing this, playing cymbal, bells, xylophone, which basically I'm using two mallets to do what I would normally use, or using one hand to do what normally requires two, trust me. And then snare them at the same time. So there's a lot going on.